Hi, and welcome to Present Pilgrimage, the podcast where we explore current affairs through a spiritual lens. I'm Jennifer Winninger. I'm a white woman born in Atlanta, Georgia. I have lived in 2 African countries and visited over 25 countries all over the world. Once married to an Egyptian Muslim, I have 2 biracial and multicultural children.
I'm Iyabo Onipere. I'm a multicultural, biracial immigrant woman of color, and I have this unwavering belief that every single life has immense and incredible value. My core values center around compassion, equity, and justice.
Some of the questions Iyabo and I want to ask you all and talk about are, how can some of our more dehumanizing and limiting behaviors be examined, looked at, and transformed? Can we learn how to train ourselves to behave more humanely towards others who are seemingly different from us? Can we learn to quiet the voices of fear and suspicion and open ourselves up to connection, learning, and understanding some of our core values?
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Jennifer and I invite you to tap into your core values and join us on this journey as we explore current issues. Might we all begin to view the world through these amazing lenses of our deepest core values? Welcome to Present Pilgrimage.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Iyabo and I are here today, June 7th, to talk about an event that happened on June 5th that Kate Spade was found having committed suicide in her apartment. And she and I had some very strong personal reactions and some thoughts about kind of general public reactions to Kate Spade's suicide. So some of the elements around it are, if we look at who Kate Spade was and is, who is a very worldwide famous designer, very successful, long-term relationship, and had a daughter. She took time off to help raise her daughter. Beautiful home in Manhattan. So seemingly externally, a lot of things that people value as part of being happy, of reaching these goals in their life, and a measure of success, having these markers. And then we find out that she has, rather kind of suddenly, there's some different reactions about how shocking it was and whether it was expected or unexpected. Killed herself in the morning. Her husband was in the apartment. And then some more details come out about she's been struggling with depression for a long time. The sister says it wasn't unexpected, which drew some reaction from people and criticism. And for me, as a middle-aged white woman, looking at her and kind of thinking, okay, you know, where in that moment, what was it that basically prevented her from kind of riding it out? If she's lived with depression, I've lived with depression, I understand what it's about. Iyabo and I were talking, what do you do in those moments to kind of get some perspective and how you move through it? Because it does change. It does. Mm-hmm. When you get in a place of despair, you can move through it, and also different phases of life. So, was it something that was related to her being in this place in her life, the breakup of her relationship? Was that the trigger? Was it the chronic depression? Was it something else? And really taking a look with ourselves about what might have been going on and how it could relate to us and where we are now.
Yeah. Well, I did a couple of things. I wrote an article for Confluence platform online where it's just a series of writings for women, by women mostly. And I also had an extensive Facebook post where people really responded to the post. And so a lot of people were shocked at this suicide. So I think that what's behind the shock is there's dissonance between what she presented, what Kate Spade presented to the world, and what ended up happening. Now, I'm not a fashionista. I don't do labels. I especially don't do labels. I really don't like people that value themselves based on the labels that they wear. That's a huge thing for me. But I've always admired Kate Spade. I liked the simplicity of her products, the excellence, their high end, their quality. I have no idea about her business practices. For all I know, it's child labor in Bangladesh that's making stuff. I don't know. But I know emotionally this suicide seemed like very dissonant to me. Whereas someone, like I said in one of my posts, someone like Robin Williams, who had, I said a mental illness. I was corrected to say we should call it a brain disorder. He had been diagnosed with a cruel form of dementia, I heard, before he took his life, which means it was more of a euthanasia even than suicide, but we all think of it as suicide. It's terminal. With him, I wasn't as shocked because he has such an extreme, shocking personality that it seemed within the realm of possibilities, even though it's not
very
a thought
creative,
I had.
out there.
So for me, what struck me was I felt I have thought about suicide. I have never been actively ideating about suicide where I've gotten the gun, gotten the pills, gotten the rope or something. No, I've not been up against it like that. But I have had such low times in my life where I was on medication for clinical depression. I'm not ashamed to talk about it. I do talk about it. I'm not on that anymore. It was for a period of my life, several years. It had to do with a hormonal imbalance that I got because I had all these miscarriages. And life was just super tough for 10 years there. And I went to bed thinking, God, please don't let me wake up in the morning. Driving around on a bridge saying, I would love to just swerve right and go in the water. Seeing a hill and wanting to fling myself off the hill. I've been right there in those moments, and it's a dark place. And one of the things when I think back to those moments was this inability to think past the next 5 minutes.
Yes.
How your brain is so frozen on what you're calling the reality of now that the lick from the puppy that you love, the beauty of a rose, the fragrance of, lilies or whatever is so inaccessible. Your memory is cut off. Your imagination and creativity is cut off.
And the depth of pain, whether it's from one precipitating event or from a buildup, of here I am back here again. This is never going to change. Having felt it before, I don't know, where's that kind of correlation?
And so people face hard times, right? One of the things I also read online was how someone was admonishing others that, listen, you need to learn how to take care of your own stuff, because if someone calls you and tells you they're suicidal, it's not okay to tell them, girl, shake it off. Get over it. Pull yourself together. Those are not adequate responses, and some of us may not even know that.
Right.
One thing I know that I'm good at is sitting in a dark space with a person and just sitting there. I love this Jewish concept of when someone dies and you just go sit, shiver. You sit to mourn. You just enjoy. Not enjoy, you just sit in the presence. There is 3 people. Like if I go to my friend who's mourning the death of someone, there are 3 people in that room, even though there are only 2 physical bodies. There's you, there's me, and the grief. So you give grief place. You create space for the grief through your silence, through your physical presence.
And I think that's important because in Western culture, you're not allowed to, it's scary. It's not okay to really feel grief and express it. You have to always be happy. You have to have the image. You have to be up. So being sad and down is not okay. I think that's a lot of the stigma about depression and bipolar. It's not okay to go to that place. Now, depression's different than grief, like in a singular event.
Sure.
But I think that, when I think about her, about Kate, maybe I don't know whether she shared if she did have this, a mental illness, if she had depression, if she felt comfortable sharing with people, or, it's perfectly her choice to decide. But if there are other people suffering, that they are comfortable enough sharing or reaching out and saying, hey, I'm sad, I am, and connecting in order to get that help and support, because it's not okay to feel that, or people can judge you for if you do have chronic depression. Oh, so-and-so's sad again. Oh, they're down again. Oh, they're always this and that. And there needs to be more awareness around depression. There also needs to be more acceptance of grief and that process.
Right. You know what you just made me remember? The first time I openly talked, I used to feel a lot of shame and stigma around the fact that I had suffered from depression. But the first time I started talking about it was when I was in seminary, and we were studying the Old Testament Psalms and the genre of literature called lament.
Yes.
Right? So the deep poems that speak to lament.
Oh my gosh. So
and
powerful.
When we think of Christianity in its forms today, we don't talk about the lament. And I believe our emotions have spiritual attributes, and that the positive and the negatives, you can't really enjoy all the good parts of emotions until you've kind of cleared out all the bottom parts of emotions. Yes. But the thing I think that struck me about Kate Spade's thing was this existential loneliness that we feel. And I think all of us have been there at some point, right? Where you just feel like nobody gets you. You're all alone. Yeah. And I think it's because one of my pet names for God is all that is. Mm-hmm. I think because we're part of all that is, when our brain tricks us into missing that, we miss it, and we know something's missing.
Yes.
And the existential loneliness is sort of weird because you came to this world alone, you're going to die alone. So we are alone, but we also need each other. And I think this is where it ties into our concept of social justice and the work we're doing with social justice on this show, which is to always remind each other of our humanity.
Yes.
And always promote this thing of being sacred human beings, that we're just that frail and we're just that strong.
That's beautiful. And I think that's what supports people through times of transition, because thinking about her, so her relationship, her long-term relationship was on the verge of ending. And when you have these kind of things in place that give you support, or think give you that kind of support, and those are changing or ending, or say you lose a job, or say, you have to move, or you lose a person in your life, and you think, what am I going to do without this one thing? If we don't have an underlying sense of God, the greater meaning of having something we can turn to that's there in that moment of grief, sitting with us, in that dark moment, then we feel despair. But we can have that. We can have those connections.
Mm-hmm. I know that one of the things I've often thought about, I even said this in something I wrote. I have a brother and I have a sister. My brother has kids. My sister doesn't. I always think of my sister, and I always think of how my actions would impact her life, because she's always been there for me. My brother's caught up in his family, as he should be. And by the way, it's his birthday. Happy birthday, brother.
Happy birthday.
I just realized that. But I always think of my sister and what damage that would do to her. Before my parents passed, I would think of them, because I just knew something crazy like that would throw them deep into the grave, right?
Yes.
But I think I just want to encourage us, I feel like this is a more somber episode of the podcast. I just want to encourage us to own all our feelings.
Yeah.
Develop safety and relationships where we can talk about them. Seek help if you need to. There's no shame in it.
No shame.
Please seek help. Even I have friends. I have a couple of clients actually, Jennifer, that are have mental health diagnoses, brain disorder diagnoses, that we talk about how to manage what's going on with the brain, with their emotions and their productivity work-wise. And I love how I'm so not intimidated by these folks, right? I love how you can tell me this and I'm still looking you straight in the eye and saying, okay, so what do you want to do with this? And so it's a factor in coaching, but I'm sitting here realizing 15, 20 years ago, I'd be like, ooh, let me leave the room. This person's cuckoo, blah, blah, blah. So life, we grow, we expand, we get new knowledge and information, and we do better. We do better. And so whatever the diagnosis is, you're loved, you're appreciated, you have value. You can continue to contribute to the world. Your life matters.
Your truth is important. Your experience is important.
Absolutely. Those things do not define you. They're just companions on your journey, you know? So the other thing I wanted to talk about was what's our role in Kate Spade's suicide? As a culture, we do not allow people to be human. We want them to be a role, right? So there's something called souls versus roles. And this is, your roles are, like mine is coach, Nigerian, Christian woman, and I don't know what else, friend, right? Jennifer's is probably mom, therapist, teacher, whatever else, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one time my father was still alive and we went somewhere and I met someone and the person said to me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a lawyer. And my daddy said, no, you're not. And I was so hurt. I was so mad. I was so mad at my father. When we got home, I gave him the riot act. I said, Daddy, why did you say I'm not a lawyer? You know I practice law. He said, that's exactly right. You practice law. It's not who you are. It's what you do. I was so mad at him. I said, he doesn't appreciate me, blah, blah, blah. It took me years to realize how valuable a lesson that was. Because today I'm not a lawyer and I don't practice law. And my life is so much better for it, right? So for that, we do that a lot. I am a mom. Actually, maybe that one doesn't work for that, right? Because you are that, right? But it's a role for a set period of your life. It's not all of who you are.
And that role needs to be fed by your soul. We need to create more space. And I invite our audience to do that, to spend a few minutes a day thinking about what feeds my soul. What is my soul?
Right.
Wait a minute. I'm not just all about the external and what I can achieve and produce. No, there's more. You know, what does it mean for you to have a soul?
Yeah.
What do you want to feed that soul? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Yeah. Your soul's not white.
Yes,
your soul's not black.
Thank you.
Your soul's not poor. Your soul's not rich. Your soul's not, a CEO, executive, and wherever, know.
Right.
So Parker Palmer, who's a Quaker educator here in the United States, talks about souls and roles. That's where I learned it from his writing. And what he talks about is how we live this very bifurcated life where we're in soul mode on Sunday morning or in role mode the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And how what needs to happen is for our soul needs to integrate with our roles and inform our roles. So our values, our priorities, our strengths, those things need to inform them. So, and the other thing Parker writes about that I love so much is this concept of your heart breaking open versus your heart breaking apart. So it is my hope and my sincere invitation that if at all you've been affected by suicide by someone near you, or even when we read of suicides of people we think we know in the media, like Kate Spade, whose face I'd never seen until this whole thing, that we would use these as opportunities to break our hearts open even more, rather than break our hearts apart, so that we can live deeper, more authentic lives.
Beautifully said. So even when everything seems to be changing around us or crashing down, all of our perceived reality is kind of out of our control or overwhelming, there is something there for us. There's always that seed. And not just God, and God, is a generalization for a lot of things, but there is hope. There's always hope somewhere.
Always.
All right.
Thank you for joining us today on Present Pilgrimage.
Thank you.